Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And it is a fantastic group here. Everybody here use Twitter? Show it. All right, Instagram? All right, good. So I want everybody to smile because you're going to be on my Instagram today. Ready? 1, 2, 3. You look beautiful. Thank you all very much. It's a great thing, I'll tell you. The world has changed so much thanks to the invention of so many of these great technologies. And as I've been fortunate to travel around the world working with entrepreneurs in innovative places like Lisbon, like Portugal, I'm always amazed by the new ideas that come up. So I'm going to keep my remarks today pretty brief because what I'm excited about is hearing the entrepreneurs, hearing the pitches that are going to happen shortly after I speak. So I was reminded as we started the introductions today that this is a very international economy that we all live in. At our lunch today, we were surrounded by people with different languages in different countries, but they're all focused around innovation and entrepreneurship. As you all know, if you speak 2 languages, you're considered bilingual. And if you speak 3 languages, you're considered trilingual. And if you speak 1 language, you're American. So today I will share my remarks with you in English only. And I look forward to learning some more Portuguese as I come back to visit. So today I'm going to just talk very briefly about sort of entrepreneurship from my own experience and building companies and ultimately converting those companies into something that is able to develop wealth, whether it be for the investors and the individuals in the company or the partners that buy the products. Because that's really one of the goals, is to continue to foster an entrepreneurial environment, an economy that takes the best and the brightest people to develop the best ideas that actually impact our society and impact the world. Essentially, the opportunity has to exist. And as I've learned more and more about Portugal and what's happening here at some of these great universities, from up in the north down to the south, the work that's happening in ICT, in medtech, and in other areas, it's clear that Portugal has a significant and important university system. In addition to that, early stage companies that are coming out of those universities like this are going to create the wealth of the future over the next 10 years. The entrepreneurial ecosystem in Portugal is growing, and that is not something to take lightly. There are so many countries where that ecosystem has yet to even form. Organizations like this, organizations like Caixa and others, are building that ecosystem in such a very special way. And I think you should really think about how to embrace that throughout all of Portugal, but also throughout Europe. And essentially, those efforts that are happening within these universities are going to create significant wealth for our children and the children's children and the university students for years to come. I certainly wouldn't expect you to read this whole slide, but essentially there's a point to be made here, which is simply this. For a majority of time, recorded history and before that, wealth was created, value and money was developed and created simply by hard goods, or ultimately the transfer of hard goods and assets. If we think back to the 17 and 1800s, merchants and merchandising and industrialists were really the individuals in our society that created wealth primarily for themselves. As we grew intellectually and became a more international society in the 1900s, what you saw is the distribution of wealth was expanding, but still through hard goods and services, whether it be oil, gas, and mining, whether it be through railways. What we saw in the 1980s, between 1930s and 1980s, is that the real wealth being created was primarily by individuals that did not create products or services, but by people that essentially built corporations around those things. So they were the individuals that built companies on the backs of those people building the products and services. And those companies became very global. What we ultimately saw is a shift where essentially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s, individuals created tremendous wealth by moving assets. Individuals could buy and sell companies. You had a global marketplace. Whether you were in London at the stock exchange or in New York City or you were in Hong Kong, tremendous wealth was created by moving assets around, mergers and acquisitions, initial public offerings, and others. But what has happened is a tremendous shift where instead of the wealth being held by a few that are creating it by moving assets or holding assets, it is now being created by startups, by founders, people that are in their college dorm room, people that are working in an incubator not far from here, that are making really useful things. And they're making things that are useful for society, and they're doing it faster and cheaper than big corporations. What I have spent most of my career doing is thinking about how do you take great ideas, whether it be in the world of life sciences, IT, telecommunications, from the lab. And that lab may be your dorm room, it may be your office, it may be the garage, but that lab where the idea is ultimately created through to the marketplace. And all of that is done on primarily two axes. If you can understand how to identify the right knowledge and the right mentors, the education and the mentors that are needed, and you combine that with capital, amazing things happen. Ideas go from simply research and development and proof of concept through the validation stages, and then ultimately on to exit. And then in a good ecosystem, those entrepreneurs that achieve an exit then come back and begin to seed the individuals that are working in the lab. This is the model that I believe has worked so well in the United States. We're seeing it work well here in Portugal, and it's working in other parts of the world. Winston Churchill said that success consists of going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. That is the foundational trademark of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not an easy path. It's easier to go work for a large financial institution or for a large government agency. It's always easier to take that path. To take the path where you're going to risk capital, reputation, you're going to do something important to change the world, you're going to be rejected over and over again. That path is not an easy one, but it is one with great satisfaction. As we sit in an academic environment like this, that's pushing the boundaries of entrepreneurship, it reminds me that the way we think about entrepreneurship has changed tremendously. The old way of thinking about entrepreneurship was innovation or ideas were created by people that were separate from the rest of the ecosystem. Those ideas were then given to business people who were sometimes called entrepreneurs. Those business people ultimately tried to commercialize those products. It was essentially three distinct functions: idea creation, commercialization, and in the middle of that was the development of a company. And what I see now is a massive shift where each of these functions, entrepreneurship, innovation, and commercialization, work together. None of them needs to start first or second. Each of them must work in a symbiotic way with the center of it being good people and good leadership. The focus on the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem is what you are doing here at this university and some of the best universities I have been to around the world, whether it be at Skolkovo in Moscow, whether it be in Singapore, or it be in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Those entrepreneurs, those academics, those business people who think about this as an ecosystem, that you cannot separate the inventor from the entrepreneur from the marketplace. If you combine those facets, those components very early, magic will be created. That is one of the great things I believe this organization is doing so well. They are taking great academic groups like this. They are taking business people as mentors. They're taking strong institutions like Kasha and others, and they're bringing them to the table at the earliest stages of entrepreneurship. And I commend you for that, and I encourage you to continue to push those boundaries. As I summarize my talk, I want to just share a few thoughts around leadership, because this is such an important topic. One of the classes I lecture at Sloan and at MIT is around how to build great teams. So leadership is a component of that. And leadership should come from each individual within the organization, ideally, not just the CEO. This is a list actually that was created a number of years ago by a colleague of mine at MIT who said the greatest leaders they have seen, not the ones that were the most financially successful, but those that had the greatest impact had these qualities. And the CEOs that had the greatest impact focused their time in these ways. They focused on raising capital and building partnerships by attracting the very best and brightest people and staying very close to their customers and listening to the market. That convergence of great leadership qualities coupled with high focus, especially at the CEO level, drives the success of companies. As I had mentioned a moment ago, fundraising is sort of the foundation of this. And through my career, I've sort of walked that balance of being the entrepreneur desperately seeking funding, and then being on the other side where we have capital to invest in companies. I still prefer the entrepreneurial side far more than the financing side. But essentially, the entrepreneurial financing world has changed a lot. And again, I'll just give you some numbers to give you an idea of how much funding is happening right now. Because I very often hear from entrepreneurs that say there's just not enough capital out there, or we can't find the capital. Just as a basic workflow of capital, you can see from 2010 through 2013, you've had a continual increase in the numbers of deals that are happening, or a consistent level of deals, as well as capital flowing into the marketplaces. These numbers come from PricewaterhouseCoopers and National Venture Capital Association. These are numbers that actually represent U.S. funding, the number of deals done at every stage, so early, mid, and later stage, private financings, as well as the total dollars invested. So the capital is there. And the question then is, well, where is it all going? Well, it's going into lots of industry sectors, but what I did is I took a look at just the 5 biggest. And the 5 biggest industry sectors, not in necessarily order, number 1 is software across the board. And a quick follow-on to that, about less than half, is the area of biotech and life sciences. And then you have some other areas that are very important. The point here is that there is tremendous capital out there. The numbers I have just happen to be representative of the United States. There's capital out there in Europe, there's capital in Asia. The point here is that the capital will chase the best entrepreneurs and the best ideas. If you are part of that ecosystem, where you are part of the discussion with the customers, if you're actually communicating with the marketplace, people will know who you are and know who your ideas are, and the capital will be able to find you. If you're networking with some of the mentors and the judges that are part of this program, they become access to that capital. So essentially, when you think about the entire model, I always think about it in sort of a simple flow, where you've got the earliest stages of starting a company, which is where many of you are today, all the way through to the public traded marketplaces, which are possible and also probable, especially in this market. But I think that a majority of the companies that you're seeing today being created, they're starting by co-founders. They're getting initial funding, and then they're going to the global market. And the global market is providing tremendous opportunity for these companies to grow. This model continues to change as the markets change. But the one thing that is absolutely unequivocally true and does not change is that the best entrepreneurs and the best ideas get funded. So I'd like to just summarize with a few additional thoughts, in that as this brand new ecosystem, this foundation that you're all building here in Portugal grows, it's to be reminded that in the early stages of an economic system, that the rewards, they go to the individuals that create the new, not the ones that are doing the old things a slightly different way. Entrepreneurship is far more important than stewardship. And entrepreneurship and innovation are critical to the success of Portugal and critical to the success overall of this economy within Europe. As you go out there and talk to entrepreneurs that you want to bring aboard your teams, as you talk to investors who you want to join your company in that ride, you have to have tremendous confidence. And one of the things that I see so often with entrepreneurs is a high level of confidence And I ask you to maintain that energy and enthusiasm. You have to pretend you're 100% confident, 100% sure as you are going forward, no matter how many no's you hear from the investors or others. And everyone here has an opportunity to grow. I think as we think about the global marketplace, so often we think locally as opposed to internationally. One of the primary focuses that I see as I talk to groups like BGI and others is that they immediately think about the global marketplace. They bring entrepreneurs and investors and catalysts together in order to help you think that way. So as you all think about building your companies, think about getting into the global marketplace, whether that be through partners, through mentors, entrepreneurs, or investors, and reach out to people like myself and many of the others to really help you capture that global market that exists. Focusing locally is how things were done in the old days. Now we live in this global market, and I encourage you all to do your best. Thank you very much for your time today.